There is something about you that people cannot quite explain. They feel it before you even speak. They sense it in the way you enter a room, in the particular quality of silence you carry with you, in the stillness that lives behind your eyes. And no matter how much they try to understand it, to name it, to categorize it, to contain it within a label they can feel safe with, something deep in them already knows they never will. Because what lives inside you is not something that was ever designed to be tamed. It is not something that responds to control, to manipulation, to pressure, or to the slow erosion that breaks most people down over time. And deep down, even those who have tried already know that. They carry that knowledge quietly, the way people carry the memory of a battle they entered with confidence and left in silence. I am Madame Tina, and this is the space where the hidden is made visible, where the unseen is finally given its name, and where souls like yours find language for what they have always carried but could never fully express out loud. If this is your first time in this space, I want you to understand something clearly. Nothing about your presence here in this moment is accidental. The universe does not send you to the wrong place. You are here because something in you recognizes something here, and that recognition is older than logic. Trust it. In this video, I am going to take you into the very heart of something ancient, something that has been present in human consciousness long before modern astrology tried to package it into a tidy set of personality traits. I am talking about the real force that moves through the Scorpio archetype, not the simplified version you have heard repeated endlessly, not the dramatic warnings, the ominous descriptions, the half-frightened, half-fascinated way people talk about Scorpio energy when they think you are not paying attention. I am talking about what actually lives at the core of this force, the part that never breaks, the part that transforms pressure into power, the part they fear because no matter what they do, no matter how hard they push, they cannot reach it, and they certainly cannot destroy it. What we are going to explore together is not entertainment, it is recognition. And for those of you who have spent years feeling like something inside you was too big, too deep, too real, too uncomfortable for the world around you to accept, I want you to know that what you are about to hear is for you specifically. It is for the version of you that survived things you never fully talk about. It is for the version of you that rebuilt yourself quietly, without applause, without anyone witnessing the full weight of what it cost you. You are seen here, more than you know. If the messages shared on this channel speak to something real in you, I invite you to subscribe and stay close. Because what is offered here is not for the casually curious. It is for those who are genuinely ready to look at themselves without flinching. And the fact that you are still watching tells me everything I need to know about where you stand. Before we go deeper into the heart of this, I want to pause for a moment and ask you something personal. Something I want you to sit with before you answer. Think back across the years of your life, across the relationships, the professional spaces, the friendships, the family dynamics. Has there ever been a person, or perhaps more than one, who underestimated you so completely, so confidently, that they built entire plans around the assumption that you would stay small, stay silent, stay manageable? And then, at some point, reality corrected them. Not because you set out for revenge, not because you performed your power for their benefit, but simply because the truth of who you are eventually became impossible to ignore, even for them. Leave that story in the comments below. Tell me what happened. Not for validation, but because your experience might be the exact mirror that another Scorpio soul needs to see today to remember who they actually are. Now let us begin, because what I am about to share goes beyond the personality profile, beyond the horoscope column, beyond the reductive list of traits that reduces one of the most complex, most powerful, most spiritually significant archetypes in existence down to a few adjectives designed to make other people feel better about their fear of you. What we are going into now is real, and it is going to resonate in a way that facts alone never do. Because the Scorpio force does not live in the mind, it lives in the bones. And somewhere in you, right now, it is already responding to what is coming. Before we continue, let me ask you a question. Do you know what moon reading is? It's a personalized astrological reading that reveals how the position of the moon impact your life, your feelings, and even your biggest dreams. Want to uncover these secrets about yourself? Get your free moon reading now. Just click the link in the description to receive your personal chart in minutes. Take this chance to connect with the stars and start your journey of self discovery. The Scorpio archetype is one of the most profoundly misunderstood forces in the entire spiritual landscape of human experience. People label it dangerous, intense, overwhelming, too much to be around for extended periods. They speak of it in hushed, cautious tones, as if naming it too directly might invite something they are not prepared to face. They call it obsessive, distractive, manipulative, consuming. And what they consistently, almost stubbornly fail to ask themselves is the most important question of all: why? Why does this particular archetype provoke such a disproportionate reaction? Why do so many people feel the need to warn others about you before you have even done anything? Why does your presence alone, simply you existing in a space, create that specific kind of restlessness in people who have never genuinely examined their own interior lives? The answer is devastatingly simple, but it carries the kind of weight that takes time to fully land. You see what others hide. You feel what others have buried so deeply they have almost convinced themselves it no longer exists. You know what others deny with their whole chest, their whole carefully rehearsed narrative, their whole constructed identity. And for a world that has built its entire social and emotional architecture on comfortable illusions, on strategic performance, on the mutual agreement to keep things pleasant and shallow and manageable, that kind of perception is not merely uncomfortable, it is threatening in the most fundamental sense. You are a living mirror held up to a world that has forgotten what its own face actually looks like. And there are people who would rather shatter the mirror entirely than stand still long enough to face what it reflects back at them. This is the first and deepest layer of the Scorpio wound, and I want you to understand it precisely because most people misidentify it. The Scorpio wound is not the wound of being unloved, though that may have happened. It is not the wound of being rejected, though rejection may have been part of the story. The core wound, the one that sits at the very center, is the wound of being too real for a world addicted to the surface. You arrived in this life already equipped with an ability to penetrate beyond the mask, beyond the performance, beyond the version of events that people construct to feel safe. You could feel the tension underneath the smile. You could sense the lie before it finished leaving someone's mouth. You could perceive the emotional reality of a room without a single word being spoken. And that gift, that sacred and terrifying gift, made you a target long before you were old enough to understand why. People do not fear what they find irrelevant, they fear what exposes them. They fear what cannot be easily deceived. And they fear, perhaps most of all, what refuses to participate in the game of pretending that the surface is the whole story. You refuse that game from the beginning, not always loudly, not always dramatically, but in a quiet, unshakable way that those around you felt even when you said nothing. And for that, you were labeled difficult, intense, paranoid, too sensitive, too suspicious, too dark. Every label was a small act of war against a perception that made others feel uncomfortably visible. But here is what they never understood, and what they could never understand because it requires a level of self awareness they were not willing to develop. Every time someone tried to diminish you, they were feeding the very fire they feared. Every betrayal you survived did not merely leave a scar, it sharpened your discernment in ways that no classroom, no mentor, no system of education could have replicated. Every abandonment you endured did not hollow you out. It drove your roots deeper into the ground beneath you, into the kind of foundational self knowledge that cannot be taken away because it was earned through actual darkness, not borrowed from someone else's wisdom. Every single attempt to break you, to confuse you, to make you doubt the accuracy of your own perception, activated something in you that cannot be activated any other way. The Scorpio archetype does not simply survive pressure, it uses pressure. It descends voluntarily into the most difficult emotional terrain and returns carrying something that ease and comfort could never produce. That is not a flaw in your design. That is the design itself. The people who feared you never quite grasped this, and that is precisely why they lost. They thought they were dealing with someone who could be worn down. They thought if they applied enough pressure, created enough confusion, introduced enough self doubt, eventually you would collapse into something easier to manage. They did not understand that they were not dealing with a wall that could be broken. They were dealing with water. And water does not break. Water finds every crack, fills every space, and in the end reshapes the stone entirely. There is a reason the ancients placed the Scorpio force at the threshold between life and death, between the known world and the one that exists beyond what ordinary eyes can see. And it was not because they considered it a curse. It was not because they saw it as something shadowed and dangerous to be kept at a distance. It was because they understood something that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten in its obsession with surfaces, with positivity, with a relentless performance of being fine. They understood that the deepest power available to a human being does not come from avoiding the darkness. It comes from descending into it, surviving it, and returning transformed in ways that cannot be faked, cannot be shortcut, and cannot be borrowed from someone else's experience. You have made that descent, more than once, perhaps more times than you have ever allowed yourself to count, because counting would require you to sit with the full weight of everything you have walked through, and there are moments when even the strongest souls need the mercy of forward motion. But I want you to pause here just for a moment and actually honor the truth of your own history. Think about the versions of yourself you have already buried, not lost, buried. There is an important difference. What is lost disappears without intention. What is buried is laid to rest with full awareness, with the understanding that it cannot continue forward with you. Think about the person you were before a particular heartbreak that changed the architecture of how you trusted. The version of you that still believed certain promises were unbreakable. The part of you that operated with a particular kind of openness before experience taught you the precise cost of offering that openness to the wrong people. You did not simply lose those versions of yourself. You shed them, the way a living thing sheds what it has outgrown, not in loss but in necessity. And what emerged each time, after the grief, after the silence, after the period of reconstruction that no one outside you could fully witness, was not a smaller, more cautious version of the person you used to be. It was something more concentrated, something more awake, something that had looked directly at the worst possible outcome and chosen, with full knowledge of what that choice cost, to continue. That is not ordinary resilience. That is spiritual refinement of the rarest kind. This is the cycle that genuinely frightens the people who have tried to use pain as a weapon against you, because they can hurt you. Life has already demonstrated that without question. You are not made of stone. You feel everything, and in many cases you feel it more deeply than the people around you could begin to comprehend. But what they discovered, often only when it was far too late to reverse course, is that hurting you is not the same as stopping you. And the distance between those two things is where all of their power over you completely disappears. They can introduce pain into your experience. They cannot determine what you build from it. They can force a descent. They cannot control what you bring back with you when you rise. And you always rise. Not always immediately, not always visibly. Sometimes the rising happens quietly, over months, in the private interior of a life that other people never fully see. But it happens. It has always happened. And the version of you that rises is never identical to the version that went under. It is always, without exception, more clear, more rooted, more precisely aware of what it will and will not accept from the world going forward. This is the karma that moves through the Scorpio archetype, and I want to correct a misunderstanding that costs many of you more than it should. The intensity of what you have been asked to experience in this lifetime is not punishment. It is not evidence that you are cursed, or that the universe has singled you out for suffering, or that something about you draws destruction like a magnet. It is precision. The universe does not send ordinary challenges to a soul that was built to operate at depth. It sends the kind of experiences that are specific to the level of transformation that soul is capable of. And every scar you carry, every chapter of your life that you have never fully spoken out loud to another person, every fire you walked through that left you changed in ways you still do not have complete language for, all of it is not evidence of your weakness. It is the most undeniable possible proof of what you were willing to endure in order to become exactly what you are standing as right now. So let them fear you. Not because you are dangerous in the way they tell themselves, not because you are dark or destructive or someone to be handled carefully from a safe distance. Let them fear you because you are free in a way that they have never allowed themselves to be. You have stood inside fires that would have consumed them completely and walked out carrying something they would not even know how to name. You have held silence in moments when speaking carelessly would have been so much easier. You have chosen integrity in situations where dishonesty would have cost you nothing visible and saved you significant pain. You have walked away from things that no longer aligned with the truth of who you are, even in those devastating moments when every part of you was still attached, still hoping, still holding the version of events in which it worked out differently. That is not darkness. That is not intensity for its own sake. That is the kind of discipline that most people, if they are being genuinely honest with themselves, will never access in an entire lifetime. The Scorpio archetype was never designed to be universally understood. It was not built for mass approval. It does not require the validation of people who are not yet willing to do the interior work necessary to meet it on its own terms. It was built to be felt, to be respected by those with the depth to recognize it, and ultimately to be sovereign, completely, unapologetically, magnificently sovereign, not above others, not in competition with others, but free from the invisible cages that so many people spend their entire lives inside without ever recognizing the bars. The cage of needing to be liked by everyone, the cage of shrinking to manage other people's discomfort, the cage of performing a smaller, more palatable version of yourself so that the people around you never have to confront the full reality of what you actually are. You know those cages. You may have tried them on at various points in your life. You may have invested real effort into being easier, softer, less perceptive, less present, less real. And if you did, you already know what that cost you. You already know that the version of yourself that fit into those cages was not actually you. It was an act of survival in environments that were not designed to hold the full scope of what you carry. And at some point, in some private moment that perhaps only you witnessed, you made a decision to stop, to return to the version of yourself that is true even when it is inconvenient, even when it costs you rooms, relationships, opportunities that required you to stay small to access. That decision, that quiet, uncelebrated return to yourself, is one of the bravest things a Scorpio soul ever does. There will always be people who mistake your depth for danger, who hear your silence and interpret it as coldness when what it actually is discernment, who encounter your boundaries and call them walls because they have never understood the difference between a wall built out of fear and a boundary built out of self-knowledge, who witness your intensity and feel threatened by it because they have never allowed themselves to want anything, feel anything, or pursue anything with that level of complete, unhesitating commitment. Let them hold those misinterpretations. They are not yours to correct. Your truth does not require their agreement to be true. Your depth does not require their understanding to be real. And your power does not require their acknowledgement to operate. You were not built to be easy. You were built to be real in a world that frequently punishes reality in favor of comfort. You were not created to make people comfortable when the truth is uncomfortable. You were created to move through this world with a quality of honesty and presence that cuts through everything constructed, everything performed, everything maintained, purely to avoid the discomfort of genuine encounter. And that is precisely why you cannot be truly defeated. Not because you are invulnerable, but because you have already died 1,000 times in the ways that matter, in the small deaths of illusion and attachment, and the versions of yourself you outgrew, and you chose life every single time. That pattern does not break, it deepens. The universe did not place this nature inside you as an accident, or as a burden to be managed, or as something to be apologized for in spaces too shallow to receive it. It placed it inside you as a mission to go where most will not, to feel what most have trained themselves to avoid, to survive what most would not have the foundation to endure, and to carry forward in your living, breathing, fully present soul the specific quality of light that can only be created inside the deepest possible darkness. That is the Scorpio force, ancient beyond memory, unyielding beyond breaking, and entirely, completely, irreversibly yours. Honor it. Protect it with the same ferocity you have always protected those you love. And never, for anyone, in any room, for any reason, make yourself smaller than the full and extraordinary truth of what you actually are.